financial shenanigans that got them into court in the first place, and then became, and if you saw the series, they spent a lot of time on the relationship between the two. And that's, there were quotes in that Hulu series from those text messages. And each time it was like, whoa, they're really going big on this.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Friday, September 30th, International Podcasters Day installment of the Silicon Insider, the only uncensored look at life and business in the Valley. My name is Mike Malone, and I'm here with special contributor Scott Budman, technology reporter for NBC Bay Area. Our producer is Jordan Henderson. Our East Coast correspondent is Bob Grove. And our host, as always, is the Silicon Valley Business Journal. Hi, Scott.
Hello.
We tried to do this last week from the Oregon coast. I'm now downstairs in my kids' room. I was going to give you a nice view of the ocean in the background, but obviously that didn't work. So,
of course, your kids have the good Wi-Fi, so now it's working.
An unmade bed over here, the usual.
Right.
So anyway, these are interesting weeks to be living in, the Irish curse. I mean, the stock market, the tech stocks got hit really hard this week. And I just saw a report come out this morning, Micron. Remember that last quarter, they said things aren't looking good. Well, now they're saying things are really not looking good, suggesting that the situation in the semiconductor industry is going to be worse than we thought.
Right. And that was one of the things that I think the tech economy, at least, had expected to provide sort of a strong base. We got some stronger numbers from the likes of Applied Materials. Nvidia has been hanging in there. But right, if the chips are suffering, I think this shows that we've even moved beyond the sort of, hey, these guys did really well during the pandemic and now they're giving something back stage. I think we're now we're firmly in inflation stage, and that's hurting the bottom line of these tech companies because inflation always does. And now there's rumblings of, large scale job cuts at some of the big companies. Yes. And these stocks are just getting beaten up because there's really not much optimism going forward.
Well, I think we kind of hope that, you remember when the dot-com bubble burst, there were a couple companies that hung on for a while. One of them was eBay, actually, and another one was Intel. Andy Grove held Intel in pretty good shape and acted as a bit of a buffer during that crash. I think we were all hoping Apple would serve that job this time around, but not so. Apparently, Apple has downgraded its numbers, right? And that just led to a massive sell-off this week in tech.
Right. I think they were counting on, and this is a discounted price, as in they kept the same price. They didn't raise the price for the iPhone 14.
Yeah.
And initial sales were, and I don't know why this is such a surprise, given how concerned people are about their employment future, about their income future, about how much things cost. But the sales were lower than expected out of the gate for the 14. They slowed production, and their stock prices really, really hit hard. And that controls a lot on the Dow, a lot on the NASDAQ.
I guess Alphabet and Microsoft hit a one-year lows as a result of that sell-off.
Right. I mean, in the last year, just in 2022 so far, I think Apple is down something like $650 billion in market cap. And granted, it swelled up to nearly 3 trillion, but still, that's real money right there. And that's a lot of it. And, Apple takes everything down with it because it's the leader now. You mentioned stocks like Intel and Cisco back in the late 90s, early 2000s. Now it's Apple. And if Apple falls, everything else is nervous. And look at how Facebook has tumbled because we don't know what the future holds for that company. And all the news out of there has been bad lately. But now, like you said, even the chips are falling. I think we're now in a phase where everybody is concerned because of inflation, the possibility of recession, job losses. There's just so much cloudiness going forward. There's really no reason right now to be an aggressive buyer, but rather to take whatever profits you can and just sort of huddle up and say, I hope I can at least keep my job.
Let me throw one more wrinkle in here. Do you remember what happened in 2001, right in the middle of the crash? Apple came through with the iPhone. The iPhone was introduced literally weeks after 9/11. a brand new industry had been created. It caught everybody's imagination. Everybody had to buy an iPhone. I don't see anything exciting, a new sexy technology, consumer product emerging right now. There's nothing to, rekindle the excitement. And Apple's become a company that, is brilliantly run, hugely successful, but it's not innovative anymore. And so there's nothing on the horizon that holds the potential of reigniting the tech world. Do you see anything? You're out there every day on the street.
Right. I mean, I know we're starting to see momentum in, say, some of the battery world, the EV world. There's some excitement around, let's say, Rivian trucks and whatever Tesla's doing, but that's not brand new. And you're right. I don't know that it's enough to completely revive anything, partially because all these things cost so much money. And now to borrow money costs more because inflation has caused interest rates to rise. So you're right. This is almost one of those batten down the hatches kind of atmospheres, I think, for tech and tech stocks. And no, I don't see a savior coming out of this right now.
Yeah, remember, not only the iPhone, but 2 years later, all the press had left Silicon Valley after the dot-com bubble burst. So nobody was noticing, but all the social networks started emerging. And then everybody discovered them about 2004. And
which, by the way, is when Google went public. And it was pretty stealthy for a while. So it really launched a big boom in tech stocks.
So we have this run from 2001 through 2005, 2006. It's the greatest run in technology history because we had two exciting new markets emerge, one of them with, billions of potential users. I don't see that right now. I don't see anywhere in our near future.
No, I don't think so. And even, the Elon Musk is tied up in court. Apple is sort of treading water, trying to sell its new phones without anything all that brand new on the horizon. So you're right. I mean, the traditional water carriers for tech are, I think, trying to bail out instead.
Yeah, speaking of SpaceX, the numbers just came out. They put more tonnage into space this last year than all the other private companies and national space agencies combined. And, most of it was because of Starlink. But this is amazing that, Elon is still making this all happen over here when we're not really looking at the moment. But space may be the thing now.
Right. Although space has tried to be the thing for a little bit on a smaller level with Richard Branson, to an extent Bezos and obviously Elon Musk. And I mean, SpaceX is capitalized. What is it now? Now that Uber went public, I think it's the biggest private company in terms of its value. It's a deca unicorn or whatever. But you're right. Space takes a lot of time, and it takes a ton of money. And I wonder if you have to be that capitalized right now to be successful because raising money is hard. VCs are pulling in the purse strings a bit. Again, interest rates are higher. So I wonder if SpaceX may be alone out there in being that successful, but certainly helping NASA. And I mean, we can talk about space till
you look up at the sky and see that new constellation moving.
Right. Well, and they're said to be
awe-inspiring. That's the kind of thing that you expect from tech every once in a while. Something that just blows away your imagination.
Right. And there's talk that they may be able to fire up the Starlink for Iran and get the word out about those protests. Not to mention the idea that they're helping NASA and what NASA is doing with the James Webb Space Telescope, et cetera. It's just, we've seen some amazing things. We hit an asteroid. I mean, this stuff is really inspiring. And hopefully inspiring the next generation.
Yeah, I think that was beyond cool.
Yeah,
that'll be our kicker today, as you suggested. On other Apple news, Apple says it's going to adhere to the UK sanctions on Russia. They're essentially going to block all Russian social media and communication sites. So the companies are now starting to get deeply involved, and Meta joined in too. They've disabled a Russian propaganda network targeting Europe. So it looks like Silicon Valley's all the way in on the Ukraine.
Yeah, and it's been that way for a while. I think those lines didn't take long to draw. and I don't see that changing anytime soon, given the political nature of it all. And I think that the tech companies have drawn their line in the sand, and they did that pretty early, frankly.
I wonder what the aftermath is going to be, depending upon how the Ukrainian war ends. Do they come rushing back into Russia afterwards, or is this a long-term disengagement?
I'm guessing long term, because we haven't gotten to the cleanup. I mean, we're still at war. They're still at war.
Absolutely.
The cleanup images from Ukraine are going to be brutal. The life lost among Ukrainians will be brutal. There might be war crime trials. I mean, this could be something that lasts in the public for a while, and you don't want to jump back in and say, hey, you can buy our coffee now or whatever.
Yeah, we're reopening the Apple store in Moscow. Yeah,
right.
I don't see that happening anytime soon.
I agree with you.
But that's going to be a sizable revenue loss for these companies. They're willing to take it. Interesting. Okay, I thought this was the most. Bob Grove sent us this one. I think, and you mentioned it too. I think this is the most interesting item of the week, though people aren't even noticing, and that is Nvidia says Moore's law is dead. Well, Intel says, oh no, it's still alive. What do you think? I mean, Moore's law is the defining force of our time. It changed the clock on humanity, on human society, starting actually at the beginning of the 20th century. We didn't notice it till the late 50s and the arrival of chips. And Gordon Moore came up with it in the early 60s in an article showing that the path of technology development, initially chips, but now moving into almost every corner of modern life, is a logarithmic curve. It's going like this, and it's been going like that for a century now. And we sort of have built our world now on the pace of change, the metronome of Moore's law. So this isn't a minor announcement that Nvidia is making. This is profound. This means that do things start slowing down now? I mean, we've accommodated our lives to continuous rapid change, the doubling every couple of years. If Moore's law is no longer working, then we move into a new era now. Now, Intel, on the other hand, is saying, no. If you remember, even Gordon Moore said, Moore's law is not a law. It's an agreement among semiconductor companies to keep advancing chip technology at this incredible, comet-like speed. And as long as they stay committed, I talked to 3 different CEOs of Intel over the years, and all of them said, I'm not going to let Moore's law die on my watch. So what do you think?
I think what you just said is maybe the most important thing here. No CEO at Intel wants Moore's law to be put to the grave on his or her watch. And that's the big thing right now. As far as the actual Moore's law, I mean, are we still even paying attention? I leave that to the smarter people who are counting the speed, not to mention the price. Companies like Nvidia became possible because of Moore's law. Yep. And yet over the last decade, I would say much more than Intel itself, companies like Nvidia have carried the torch of Moore's law. Yes. Staying relevant, staying fast, doing amazing things with computer chips. And so there is something significant for a relative upstart in this game, if you can call Nvidia that, after decades, to say, hey, the great Moore's law is over. But they've been the carriers of that law much more than Intel for some time. So who knows if Jensen Huang is trying to get a little extra PR out of this, but he more than most would know, I think, because they are the ones that have been moving the chip speeds, not to mention the prices along, even more than the Intels of the world.
Right. And, part of it's how you define Moore's law. If it's just clock speed, that's one thing. But if you're talking about big monolithic chips, yeah, we're no longer moving at Moore's law. But if you're talking about constellation of chips, you're talking about going into 3 dimensions on chips. There's a lot of ways to improve Moore's law. You can improve it in price, you can improve it in size, you can improve it in performance. So, and look, I heard a speech a couple of years ago from the chief technologist at Intel, and he said, there's basically a lot of room to keep going on Moore's law. You just have to go a different way. I mean, maybe you put the chip into a little superconducting bath. Uh, that's how you keep going. Maybe you change the substrate. Maybe you change the way you create the chip itself by etching on the surface of the silicon wafer. We'll see. I called Moore's law dead probably 4 times, just like I called Silicon Valley dead 4 times. I've always been proven wrong, thankfully, because technology stops being fun the day that Moore's law ends. You know, then it's just a commodity we're cranking out. As long as we're pushing the frontiers of, you know, human imagination and innovation, life is interesting in tech. You know, if you say Moore's law is dead, then we're in the sweeping up at the end of the story of Silicon Valley too. And you and I don't have jobs.
Right.
Yeah. So we'll see. I'll be interested if Nvidia, you know, talks a little bit more about this and explains their position. Okay, Bill Gates. Bill Gates has been kind of, you know, he's been kind of talking a little bit odd the last few years, you know, kind of messianic. But he actually said something that seemed almost sane, which was, you'll never solve climate change by asking people to consume less. Did you see that quote?
Yeah.
Asking people to degrowth is not realistic because they're not going to utterly change their lifestyle because of concerns about climate. I think he's partly saying it's going to hit us in the head before we actually do anything. But I think he's caught something about human nature that's probably pretty true.
I mean, I guess so. I think on the individual level, I might disagree. I mean, you can change how you shop for clothes. You know, you can thrift instead of, you know, you can use solar energy and you can use less power and you can certainly use less gasoline in your car. And that's cutting back a little bit. Less travel means, you know, less fuel from the planes. Right. And that's on an individual level. But right, as society, I think what we have to do, and I've heard this many times, is innovate to fight climate change.
And that's what he says. The solution is going to be to innovate better and cheaper alternatives.
Yeah, and
full circle to Moore's law.
Perhaps so, but also to encourage thinkers and companies. You know, I mean, Tesla is a good example. That certainly cost a lot of money, but now we've got all these cars rolling around that don't emit, you know, that don't emit CO2. So what else are we going to do? You know, we've got to come up with more, you know, green tech, as they say, more solutions like solar panels and EVs and stuff like that.
Exactly. And what's the best way to do it? We have this engine sitting there, the greatest innovation engine in the history of mankind, Moore's law. As long as we can keep that, will keep driving innovation because it keeps driving down price and it improves performance. So, you know, it's like light a candle in church this week for Moore's law. Don't let it die, because what Gates is saying, we got to innovate better and cheaper.
Right, and we've done that with chips.
Abundance. What has given us all this unprecedented abundance over the last 50 years?
Moore's law, that's right. And as the chips have come down, we've been able to put them into these new cars and things like that. But now, I mean, look at what the focus is on. It's on batteries, and can we do that larger and more powerful and cheaper? And it's almost like we need that sort of a law for battery technology if we're going to accelerate into the electric world.
And I think we're going to see that. I mean, we've seen a little bit of it, but I think we're about to go into overdrive. Remember, Moore's law starts out real slow, and then it just ramps straight up. And I think we're going to see that the same thing happen in batteries. Okay. Oh God, the Twitter Musk trial. All right. So Elon's testimony has now been bumped to next week, right? But
right.
Jack Dorsey has said he tried to get Elon on Twitter's board, but the directors were too risk averse. You know, now you got the founder bad mouthing the board of directors. This is getting weird.
Well, look, I mean, the position Jack Dorsey is starting to take is just unusual, and he's gone from super ally to Musk to now Musk is even criticizing him, because that's what Elon Musk does. He criticizes everyone around him and burns bridges. That's just what he does. The last couple of days have seen all these text messages come out from the the discovery. And, you know, as someone who literally sent those Elizabeth Holmes messages out to tens of millions of people, who knew that that would catch on so big on my Twitter account. I'm looking at these Elon texts and thinking once again, maybe we all just text too much and we should stay out of the courtroom, or, you know, one or the other has got to stop, because this is a little embarrassing. I mean, it has a lot of investors very thirstily reaching out to Elon. Oh, I want to be part of this. And Elon reaching out to people like Gayle King. Hey, maybe we can get Oprah Winfrey on the board of directors. It sounds a bit like what you just said. All of this comes down to, had Twitter just said, okay, Jack, we'll put Elon on the board because he's got a lot of money and a lot of influence, let's just move on, this might not have happened. We might not be here if that board seat was taken up by, granted, a loud, brash person, but that person happens to be Elon Musk, who's a legend in the Valley.
Isn't Twitter loud and brash anyway?
Yes.
No,
I think it would have been a good
Newcastle.
I think it would have been a good move to have him on the board of directors. But, you know, people, we can't have him on the board of directors. And so he steps in and now says, well, I have enough money to just take over the whole company. And now Twitter is this gigantic question mark, you know, in terms of where it goes from here leadership wise.
Let me roll back to something you said a little bit earlier. List the Elizabeth Holmes stuff. How many hits did you get? Was this on your Facebook or on Twitter?
It was all on Twitter, and the text messages, and there was one of them that literally got 12 million clicks. One. And that just led to, I mean, I'd never seen anything like that for something as what I thought was fairly meaningless as a small piece of evidence, but people just went nuts on it. And that led to, you know, talking about it forever and all this stuff. And it just brought even more attention because there was this pseudo sort of, is it romance? Is it business? Is it a mix of both? And I think a lot of people could relate, and it made things a little more salacious. And again, I mean, even in the courtroom among the other reporters and spectators, people were like, whoa, do I text message like this? You know, if I get into court, is this going to come out as embarrassing? And you're starting to see that on a business level, at least right now, I think, with the Musk texts to and from other people.
I mean, those numbers that you got, they say something culturally that we like the soap opera aspect of tech business. We don't care about the technology. That's just magic, you know. It just makes interesting things happen somehow. But romance and busted romances and, you know, mispresentation of facts and all of this kind of stuff, that's the kind of stuff we like.
Yeah, I mean, this went from the technology and, you know, financial shenanigans that got them into court in the first place, and then became, you know, and if you saw the series, they spent a lot of time on the relationship between the two. And that's, I mean, there were quotes in that Hulu series from those text messages. And each time it was like, whoa, they're really going big on this. And I think someone right now is sketching out a book on this whole Twitter mess.
Or a script or a screenplay. Yeah.
Or a script, right.
Okay, we talked about this before. It just happened. California is trying to stymie abortion prosecutions in other states by making it illegal for the Silicon Valley companies and other businesses to hand over personal information of abortion seekers to out-of-state authorities, in particular geolocation data, search histories, and other personal information. You know, we right when Roe got tossed, we talked about this, that if some states were going to allow abortion, some weren't, and people are going to be traveling to other states to get an abortion, they would be very vulnerable to having surveillance and search on their stuff.
Absolutely.
But California is going to try to make that illegal.
You know, the idea of privacy and lack thereof with a lot of these devices and a lot of these apps has always been talked about, and the privacy advocates have been, you know, beating the gavel on this for years and years. But in some ways, it really took something this personal and this private to get some of these companies and some of the legislatures to actually move on it. And, you know, it's too bad it took something like this that's frightening for a lot of people. But I think it's very important that we look at your privacy and your data And this really isn't how you feel politically about this. This
Right.
is your data, and is it okay that it's given up to anybody? And of course, the answer is no. And we're starting to see some movement on that, I think, because of this issue.
Well, I mean, we've been whittling away at personal privacy in this country for a very long time now, really since the beginning of this century. And an attempt to, a countermeasure is unbelievably welcome in my mind. You've got to protect people. We are losing this ability to be private.
Right.
And,
right.
and I think young people, I think millennials have now begun to catch on. They're getting old enough, they have enough at stake, and they have enough personal history that they're getting wary. The next generation after that, they're still, let's go on TikTok. Let's, I don't care if they keep track of every one of my keystrokes, but I think millennials are catching on now.
I think so. And it's not all that surprising, that young people are traditionally not worried about privacy. And I mean, really young people, the kind that are on TikTok now, and you're telling them, hey, this data may be sucked up by a Chinese government. What does that mean to a very young person? And I was young once, I remember, it doesn't mean much. Yeah. But you're right. When you get into even early adulthood, your privacy, your intimate details, you realize that they should be private. And I think there's a lot of reckoning happening right now because of this issue and because of how much we're just used to putting out there on social media and sites like TikTok. And I think this is a really important reckoning to have. And you're right. I think millennials are probably the people who are starting to have it. What's the age? It's a pretty big age range, I think, of millennials, 26 to 44 or something like that. I think maybe even a little earlier than that, people are starting to realize, hey, as I get into my 20s and have relationships and perhaps have kids, and in other words, things that just should be kept private, all of a sudden, what I put out there may come back to haunt me and may track me. And that's something that people are starting to get scared about. And that's how change happens.
Yeah, I think it happens in the mid-20s, like right out of college, or you didn't go to college, you went to high school, you're about 4 years into a job and just got married. All of a sudden, that statement you've been making, I got nothing to hide, suddenly goes, wait a minute, I have a lot of things to hide now, and
hide,
that stuff is mine.
Right.
It's not everybody's. People shouldn't have access to those things in my life.
That's a good sentence, because it's not what we have to hide. When we think of, I don't have anything to hide, I'm thinking, well, I don't have any drugs on me, or I'm not speeding, or I'm not doing anything illegal. But that's not just what we want to hide. Yeah. The very natural things in life that we do, but that are ours, that are personal, that shouldn't be broadcast out there. And that's what I think people are realizing. Even the law-abiding citizens are saying, wait a minute, there is a lot of stuff that should not be out there. And it's not just, I'm not doing anything illegal. It's that I'm doing some private things in life right now, and there are decisions being made about my private life. And that's where I think the fear is coming in, and then the concern, and that's legitimate.
I think what makes us human is we set boundaries outside of ourselves of what is our world and our space. And just philosophically, we don't want to give that up.
Right.
And we've been giving it up for a generation now.
Absolutely.
Okay. The kicker. We crashed into an asteroid. Was that the coolest special effects thing you've seen in a while?
Yes. Short answer, yes. And the idea that, we have cameras everywhere, so you could see the probe moving into the asteroid, and that was just fantastic. And
I love the shape of the thing. I was expecting something kind of amorphous, and it was kind of like a potato,
right,
with littered by little glitters of rocks everywhere, and they're almost randomly placed on it. And you kind of thought, how did it actually get created that way?
There are all sorts of things we're going to learn, I think, here. And the idea of, say, the Webb Space Telescope, or, I was just up at SLAC in Menlo Park, where they now have the biggest digital camera in the world. And that's going to an observatory in Chile to be attached to a telescope that's going to be able to see half the sky. I mean, it's just amazing what we're progressing on in space.
Moore's Law.
Moore's law, yes. Well, there are chips involved in all these things. This
I'm
thing,
going to keep pointing that out because it's everywhere.
right? This camera has 3.2 billion pixels, which, contrast that to your iPhone, folks.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
Now, do we know if the probe actually moved?
I think we will. I don't know if we know yet. I think we have to then track the pattern of the asteroid to see if on impact, did it move a little bit? Did it shift its path?
That's the whole point, right?
Exactly. And if we figure that out, I mean, it's literally, isn't it life imitating art, right? We saw that in the movies where, Bruce Willis would go up there and do his thing. And now we're actually potentially moving an asteroid out of the way, which is amazing.
I think that there was a sea change when we realized that massive meteor impact or asteroid impact on Earth, or the death comet, whatever it was that hit the Yucatan and killed the dinosaurs. From that point on, we realized there's stuff out there that could kill us really fast, planet destroying event. And ever since then, we've been thinking, well, there's two possibilities, right? One of them is to hit those things out there and blow them up or move them before they arrive, or get off Earth, meaning start inhabiting the solar system so some of humanity survives if we do have one of these, life-ending events on Earth. We seem to be moving forward on both of them suddenly at a pretty good pace. We're going to have people on the moon pretty soon. And we've just done this probe. And if we back that asteroid up, or whatever it is, meteor up a little bit, that's good news too.
We'll see. I'm curious what it all means if indeed it did work. And are we safer? Have we opened up some sort of Pandora's box? Who knows?
But in the meantime, it was a hell of a show.
I agree.
I have to admit. Okay, that's it for now, folks. You can find us on the Silicon Valley Business Journal homepage, as well as on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Well, I think you probably already know that by now. Have a great weekend. Once again, happy International Podcaster Day. And we'll see you next week. I will be back in Silicon Valley. Bye-bye.